Hello everybody and welcome back to the scene. Here we are at week 5. Here I am with Bradlee Semino. Wow, we took our bye week last week.
We did. It was a good week off. We're back feeling refreshed. I think we should be good for week 5.
I'm refreshed. I'm injury free.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I had to rest my hammies, but they feel better now, so we're all good.
Absolutely. I was getting tennis elbow from all the drinking I was doing at the bars with you guys. I kind of rested it. I'm good to go now. Don't worry, I'm back in the game. You can count on me. But what we also saw in the last couple of weeks is we saw some people move up and some people move down. Who are some of the people that moved up since the last time we talked to our fan base?
Well, some of the biggest risers, you definitely got to throw Mississippi State Bulldogs in there.
2 weeks ago, where were they?
Exactly. Dak Prescott's kind of been a dark horse Heisman the whole offseason. People kept picking him as a trendy kind of guy. He really came on the second half of last year, did some good things. Kind of a poor man's Tim Tebow, if you will. He's got, good control of that offense. He's a good leader, somebody that's really elevated the play of the teammates around him. And they went into Death Valley last weekend. Unfortunately, during the bye week, I was at the game in Baton Rouge, and he just rolled right over the Tigers.
Death Valley, one of the hardest, if not the hardest places to play in America. I think you've only lost 3 home games there at night in the last 15 years or something like that.
Yeah, there hasn't been very many.
It's few and far between. Now, the interesting thing about Mississippi State is if they do too well, they may lose their coach.
Yeah, Dan Mullen's kind of even on the hot seat. He's been mediocre his whole career at Mississippi State. He hasn't really taken him to that next step. This is his first time he's beaten LSU or Alabama or Auburn since he's been at Mississippi State. He was 0-for against the 3 big teams in the West. So, this was a huge win for the Bulldogs. Now they're ranked 14th. So, they're in that position where if they can hold it together, they could be in the top 10 in the next 2 weeks. So,
they got to go through the SEC West, which
they do. So it's brutal division.
Difficult. Yeah.
But great win by Mississippi State.
And now who's back in it? Who from the East?
You got to look at the Georgia Bulldogs back in it after losing to South Carolina. People kind of said they lost last week to South Carolina. Well, then they come out and kill Troy, and they're still a top 10 team.
Yeah, and then South Carolina's right back in it.
South Carolina.
Yeah, South Carolina fans, God bless you, man. You guys thought everything was over.
Got absolutely annihilated at home by Texas A&M to start the season.
Now you're basically in control of your destiny because you haven't lost to an SEC East team.
Exactly.
So congratulations on that one. Your season has totally been resurrected.
And that close win against East Carolina that looked bad at the time looks a heck of a lot better now. East Carolina knocked off Virginia Tech 1 week after they beat Ohio State.
East Carolina
killed North Carolina last week and put up 70 points. On the Tar Heels.
But they gave up 41.
They didn't give up 41, but they still won by 29 over a team that was ranked at the beginning of the season. So
you gotta love when a team does that.
The Pirates are doing quite well this year.
Yeah. So here we got some games coming up this week. It's not exactly a. Actually, let's back up a little bit. This past weekend, my guys had a nail biter.
Yeah. No Jameis Winston. What'd you think of the Noles' performance without their leader?
Going into the game, I thought we were going to win. Going into halftime, I thought we were going to lose. Going into the last 5 minutes of the game, I thought we were going to lose. And we were very lucky to come out with a W. But you take them. I'm not going to give it back. I'm not going to give the win to Clemson. But I don't think we had any business winning that ball game. That was totally an example of them losing it and not Florida State winning it. I don't make any excuses.
At the very end of the game, Sean McGuire throws an interception. The Clemson intercepts about the 50 and runs it back to the 25 or so. Yeah. Clemson's all they have to do is set up, kick a field goal as the game ends, and it's over. Well, they might have missed the field goal, but they would have at least had a chance. Instead, they run the ball and fumble.
Yeah,
and get the ball right back.
Wow, it was one of those games where you're sitting there as a fan of that team, and there's one of those emotional things like this. It's like, oh my gosh, we tied it. Oh my gosh, we threw an interception. Oh my gosh, we got the ball. And, it was like that. The last quarter of that game, I was all over the place. So, but again, lucky to have a W. I'll take it and get the heck out of there.
Exactly. So Florida State, they live to fight another day. They're still undefeated. They really only have one tough game remaining on the schedule against Notre Dame. Should be a great game. We hung out some Notre Dame fans a couple weeks ago. Saw them kill Michigan.
They're looking forward to it.
We know the Irish are good. They are still undefeated this year as well. It's going to present a big challenge. Probably the only one Florida State has left. Do you think anything else could stumble Knowles, or you looking at that game on the calendar?
Shoot, this weekend, man, I have a little bit of coaching experience. A little bit, nothing to brag about. It's only middle school level. But I'm telling you, when you have a game like this that is full of emotion, and you leave it all out there like that, even as a coach, it's hard to practice with as much intensity. It's hard to practice with as much focus. It's hard to demand that much of your team. And that's what makes Nick Saban the best, in my opinion, because he's always able to get that out of their team during the week. We don't like going to North Carolina or NC State. This is a trap game for Florida State.
Wasn't one of y'all's years you went to the national championship the only loss of the season with Chris Winkie? Wasn't it at North Carolina State?
1998, he threw 6 interceptions. No, that was 99. It was 99.
Yeah,
So yeah, but then there's Louisville on the road on Thursday night.
Okay, so a couple tough games. But one game you don't have to worry about losing is the Florida Gators. I mean, they did give Alabama a fight on the scoreboard, at least, for the first half when it was tied 21-21, but Florida was outgained 5-1 in that game. They only stayed in it because of turnovers. I mean,
they gave up the record number of yards.
Yeah, and Alabama's not known for their offense, especially this year. So,
that score probably was more like 56-7.
Yeah, it was bad.
It didn't look good. Now let's talk about Florida. Florida has who this weekend?
Well, the Gators are playing
Tennessee's next weekend.
Tennessee's next weekend.
That's the game that I have circled on my calendar for Florida, is the one that decides Muschamp's fate. Okay? I don't believe he's as bad as people want to make him out to be, or some people want to make him out to be. I think he's an excellent defensive coach. I think he's an excellent recruiter. I think he's had an unfortunate set of circumstances that have led their offense to the position they're in right now. But you lose to your rival, you get killed by Alabama. You have 2 bad years in a row. That's a recipe to get rid of a coach.
I definitely think there's going to be some turnover in Florida at the end of this year, unless he pulls off a miracle and comes back. But I don't see it happening with this Gator team. They're pretty putrid to watch offensively right now.
Driscoll is not the answer, per Emmitt Smith.
Exactly. Yeah, he apologized today for that tweet he said. So, Emmitt Smith probably got told by a few people at Florida that.
Now, what's the Thursday night game?
This week, Thursday night, we got 2 good games tomorrow night. We got Oklahoma State, who played Florida State pretty good in that first game. They're playing Texas Tech. And then the big game, late night tomorrow night, we got Arizona State and UCLA. Both teams undefeated in the Pac-12, both in the top 15. Both seeing now that Stanford lost as the biggest challengers to Oregon. So, Arizona State, big deal with them is their starting quarterback's out for the game. So they're at home playing UCLA, but with a backup quarterback. And, you never know what's going to happen. Yeah, just like Florida State this past weekend. So, UCLA has to look that good.
They just nothing's impressed me about them yet. The funny thing is, you could almost say they're like Florida State. Florida State hasn't really impressed me all that much, but they're ranked.
Yeah.
UCLA hasn't really impressed me all that much.
UCLA barely beat Virginia. They barely beat Texas. Brett Hundley was one of the leading contenders for the Heisman Trophy coming into the season. Hasn't looked that great.
He didn't even finish that last game, didn't he? Didn't Kurt Newhousel's kid go in?
Yeah, he did. Yeah. So, the Bruins, I don't know if they can. I think Arizona State's a better team, but with a backup quarterback, you just never know what's going to happen.
Thank God they got it at home.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, Clemson fans, there's no way we would have beaten you on the road at Death Valley in Clemson.
No,
there's no way in a million years. So
it definitely helps McGuire to have that home field crowd behind him.
Or not have have the opposing team's fans raining down on him.
Yeah. Well, getting back to SEC country for a second, Missouri was, looking like they were going to be in, the driver's seat for the SEC East race. And they go out last week and lose at home to Indiana. If there's one thing the SEC doesn't do, it's lose to Big Ten teams. Much less lose to the worst Big Ten team. So,
but that was the division champion.
Yeah, I know. I just don't understand. So, but now Missouri has a chance to redeem itself going on the road to Columbia this weekend. South Carolina, Missouri. South Carolina's already been battle tested this year.
But what are we going to get
hard
from
games?
Oh man,
what's the Gamecocks going to do?
Yeah, what Gamecock team is going to show up? That's got to be frustrating for South Carolina fans. You beat Georgia, all coming off that Texas A&M loss. What team's going to show up? Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde here. I guess we'll find out.
And is South Carolina just going to play every game at home at the beginning of the year? They've already played, Georgia at home. They played Texas A&M at home, and now they get Missouri at home. They're going to have no SEC games at home halfway through the season. So weird how their schedule sets up. But, I think the Gamecocks at home, they're a slightly better team, but Matty Mock's been doing a great job out there in Missouri. Besides the last game, they've been doing very well the last 2 seasons overall.
Yeah.
I think this was a complete toss-up. I could really see it going either way, and it's going to have big implications on the East race. And those Georgia Bulldogs are pulling from Missouri because then they'll put them right back with 1 loss ahead of South Carolina. So
who's Missouri? Who does South Carolina play? Does South Carolina play any more teams from the West?
South Carolina does play at Auburn later in the year, so that's another.
Georgia's going to be rooting for Auburn.
Exactly, because Georgia's probably going to lose to Auburn the week after South Carolina plays them.
I had Georgia in that one. That's a revenge game. Auburn's got back-to-back revenge games, almost back-to-back, against Alabama and then Georgia. I think there's another game squeezed in there in between, but that's tough. That's tough. Anyway, that's another discussion.
Yeah, and Auburn, they played Kansas State last Thursday night.
Great game. I love that game.
The game was good, but the offense wasn't very good.
Auburn had more passing yards.
Shut down the Auburn rushing attack.
Auburn had more passing yards than rushing yards. That's what kind of game it was.
Exactly. So, it was a sloppy game. It was close. It was hard fought by both sides. But, Auburn and Florida State and UCLA, 3 of those teams that have been ranked high all year that haven't really overly impressed me yet.
Yeah.
They haven't had that game where they've made me think, wow. Alabama hadn't either until last week when they just throttled Florida. That made me say, wow. I haven't seen that yet from Auburn.
Alabama's number 1 right now. In my book, I got Alabama number 1. They've had the most impressive victory.
Yeah, Alabama's definitely looked good, and Oregon almost lost at Washington State. There's a lot of teams having close calls here early in the season, so it's really hard to know right now how the season's going to end up shaking out.
I think teams are going to start finding their midseason form. If they don't, you're going to. I'm just going to use Florida State as an example. If Florida State doesn't find some sort of midseason form, they're going to end up with 2 or 3 losses. That's just the way I think of that team right now. We were 108th in rushing in the country. You can't do that and expect to have any kind of playoff expectations. So
there's definitely some teams that need to show some improvement, and one team up north that's just completely fallen off. The Michigan Wolverines lose at home to Utah, 26-10, and this is an Urban Meyer's Utah team. This is a bad Utah football team that went into Ann Arbor, shut down the Wolverines. If you saw some of the pictures, it had a rain delay. After the rain delay, when Michigan was losing 26-10 in the 4th quarter, I think 10 fans showed back up in the stadium that were wearing maize and gold. The rest were all Utah fans. It was the most embarrassing sight I've ever seen in Michigan. The fans had no expectations anymore.
Have you heard the coaching rumors?
No, I haven't.
Mr. Harbaugh.
Harbaugh, yeah. He has fallen out of favor with San Francisco.
Yeah, unbelievable. It's so weird. Yeah, I thought he was the golden boy out there.
Yeah, he's done great, but he's clashed heads with the ownership, and he has issues with a lot of people out there in the front office.
And Michigan can start talking to him right now because he's not coaching college football.
Exactly. So Brady Hoke is not the answer there anymore. I thought he was going to be a good choice coming out of San Diego State after doing good there and at Ball State, but Michigan shows no life anymore. They're kind of just floundering around. They need to change the top over there.
And another team. This has really become a topic in the last couple of days. Is Charlie Strong in Texas? He's kicked 9 people
players
off the team. 9? Nobody's safe there.
He's being smart though. Hey, he can say, well, no reason we lose 6 games this year. I kicked half the team off. We had to restart. He's being smart. He thought he couldn't win with this team, so why not just kick a few players off, give him another built-in excuse as to why he can't be successful this year?
Well, I don't know what his method is, but I do know that they had to trim the fat from the years prior there at UT. But
Mack Brown was a great recruiter, but he was always known as a player's coach. He didn't discipline.
Dangerous line to toe.
And Charlie Strong's gotten in there. He's imposing his will. He's saying, if you don't go my way, you're going to go find another way. And he's kicking all these players off. And these are all
9.
starters, too. This isn't just like 9 backup players. It's like half his offensive line.
Yeah.
So, the Texas Longhorns, it's going to be a long time before they are back to where they used to be.
I'm sorry, the more and more things unfold over the last couple of years, the more and more I feel like Texas A&M, if they can capitalize while UT is down, they're just going to get some kind of monster classes back to back to back. And they could go on some kind of magical run that competes, be in the title game 2 out of 3 years, something like that.
Definitely. I mean, Texas has always owned that state, but there's so much talent to go around. And with Texas kind of falling off a little bit, this is probably the first time I've ever been able to really think Texas A&M is the #1 program in that state right now. So, they've had good years and they've always been close, but this is the first time I've ever truly think they've surpassed Texas as far as like just national prestige right now.
Don't tell UT fans
to go there.
Do not tell
Texas
Longhorn
A&M
fans
is the fad name, especially among offensive high school football recruits.
Yeah.
They want to play for Kevin Sumlin. He's got high-powered offense. He's shown he can develop quarterbacks. It's a great place to go if you want to put up some stats in college on offense.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. The guy has it clicking out there on offense. If they get that defense going with it, they're good to go. So.
Well, yeah, so this weekend, there's not too many big games out there, but we've got some feelers out there for some good spots around town that are going to be hosting some parties for the game. So we're going to be out there mingling with the fans of Atlanta college football. And
may give you an update?
Yeah, may give you an update, but we'll definitely be bringing some new video from the scene to you next week from what we shoot this weekend.
Sounds like a plan.
Sounds good. Well, we'll see y'all again soon. And before I sign off, I'm wearing my Georgia Tech shirt today. This is just an ode to the 4-0 local Yellow Jackets. I mean, come on now.
4-0.
4-0. I mean, they squeaked by Georgia Southern. They were down to Wofford at the beginning of that game.
You just got to feel like there's a good percentage.
They won at Virginia Tech.
There's a good percentage of Georgia Tech fans who are secretly upset with being 4-0. Because this was the year that they were going to be able to get rid of Paul Johnson, his contract, to break it.
Now they're probably going to have to give him a raise.
It's just going to be harder at the end of the year. Like, what if he beats Georgia at the end of the year?
Yeah, I mean, what if?
Oh my gosh. I like Tech.
This is definitely one of those seasons I could see Tech being just an average team, but finishing the year 10-2. And
you never know.
Who knows? But congratulations to the Yellow Jackets and to all those Atlanta Georgia Tech fans out there, and we'll be keeping an eye on them as we go forward, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Take care.